I think you all will relate. We all got focused on our lodge issues, but we ignored neckerchiefs and we ignored lodge activity issues. And, we paid the price. Once you get to a certain, point, you start thinking, okay, now I got to go back and get these others. And that's where I am now. Well, let me start by welcoming everybody. I'm glad to see such a good crowd. I will say that when I thought about doing this, I thought, well, this won't be that hard. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was biting off more than I could chew in 20 or 30 minutes, without a doubt. And the hardest part of this, I think, was just trying to figure out how to summarize some of this, or how to put all of this together, because we're talking about thousands and thousands of Order of the Arrow neckerchiefs across our time. And so it was hard to kind of get a feel for what is going to be the legacy of the Order of the Arrow neckerchief. I think when I threw that out there, I didn't really know where the end was going to be. I still don't know that I do, but we're going to try to cover a few things just to give you some things to think about, and certainly want your input as well, because this is more just of a quick review, not a lecture by any means. As I mentioned before, when I started collecting, I ignored neckerchiefs when I was collecting Region 5 and Southeast Region and issues and things. And, once I got to a point where I needed something to look for, that's when I went back and started trying to collect neckerchiefs. And then that just expanded, because it seemed like there were very few people who wanted to do that. So I thought, well, okay, I'll do this. And, fast forward 20, 30 years, and now I've got boxes and boxes and boxes of these things. Some of which I know what they are. Some of, frankly, I don't, and I'm going to get to that a little bit. But just to have a place to start, all of us, when we joined scouting, probably learned about the utilitarian function of the neckerchief, right? I mean, there was a purpose for a neckerchief, and when you were a starting scout, and you learned the first aid aspects, and you learned the other things. But over the years, that developed into somewhat more of a recognition piece, and certainly in the Order of the Arrow, it was more of a recognition piece. So what I tried to do to break this up a little bit, because we've got so many to cover, is sort of give you a timeline of the predominance of the OA neckerchief in certain settings, and then we'll talk about what some of the items of pride among lodges and things. That this first slide here is just a teaser to kind of give you a feel from where we were at one time, where we've been in pre-OA versus OA societies, and then this one, which I think is probably the only pie that I know of that actually spells out Wemak Tending, Wingo Lausik, Weta Hemaway. So with a quarter circle pie neckerchief patch, you can get a lot on it. I guess is what you can say with that. So some of you may have seen this picture before, but these are the charter members of my original lodge, Pellissippi, in Knoxville, Tennessee, Great Smoky Mountain Council. These members were inducted in August of '42, and one of the moms of one of these guys made up 11 neckerchiefs and presented them to them at the council banquet. So this is a picture of those 11 guys wearing what we consider to be the first neckerchief of the lodge. Now, there are 11 of them. Okay, I have one. This is the one I have. But this would have been considered the first neckerchief, and we're talking 42 here. So the first neckerchief of the Pellissippi Lodge, and one of the earliest neckerchiefs that I know of in our area. Okay, that would have been considered specifically for recognition in the Order of the Arrow. You can tell it's pretty generic. Some of the members sewed the camp patch on for that year. Some did not. I happened to get one where he sewed it on. I'm glad he did, because otherwise it's so generic that you may not even know what you got. We talk about pre-OA societies some, and this is a membership certificate, actually from a member of Golden, or actually Order of the Golden Sun, and I think that's Omaha, Nebraska, I want to say, Cornhusker Council, and this member was inducted in 1931. Now, this neckerchief was an Order of the Golden Sun neckerchief, not his neckerchief, but probably a late 40s neckerchief. So this, again, developed into a piece of recognition for a group, which then turned into Golden Sun Lodge. And this is one of the earlier neckerchiefs from Golden Sun. But I put this in here again just to show you that across the nation in the 40s, you were beginning to see some of this, some recognition pieces among neckerchiefs, not necessarily among items that you would wear elsewhere. In the 40s, the earliest that I could think of was the 1940 national meeting, and this was the neckerchief for the Order of the Arrow national meeting in 1940. And Anarchist Lodge, who was the host, actually had a host neckerchief very similar to it with Anarchist, I think, across it instead of WWW. But you all may know of an earlier national neckerchief, but this was the earliest one I could think of. Now, I think this piece is important because it showed you that when the order had national meetings, or whether they had regional meetings, area meetings, the neckerchief began to be the piece that was developed for that meeting or was seen among lodges who attended that meeting. To give you a feel for that, and that, of course, the next meeting wasn't until 46, but this is the earliest of regional meetings that I know of, area meetings, and was at Camp Siwanoy, which was Chapagat Lodge. And Chapagat was one of the earliest lodges, I think, to have a lodge neckerchief as well. I don't know if it predated any of their patch issues or not, but this is one of the earlier neckerchiefs. Some of you may be able to tell me a little bit better. But as the 40s went on, you began, and remember, in Pellissippi, that was 42 when we had a neckerchief for our charter members. But as the 40s went on, then you began to see a few more lodges create delegate neckerchiefs to these national meetings. And this is the one from Lodge 7 in Chicago for 46. They did one for 48 and beyond, but you began to see a few neckerchiefs that were considered delegate neckerchiefs. Now, let me go on beyond that a little bit. So when the 50s hit, then delegate neckerchiefs, or neckerchiefs that were designed specifically to be worn at area, regional, or national functions of the Order of the Arrow, started to become more predominant, and yet they were still fairly crude and in some fashion homemade. This is the 1950 NOAC, as we would call it now, National Meeting patch, which was sewn to a plaid neckerchief. Now, this neckerchief and patch came from a national committee member at the time, who was a member of the National OA Committee at the time. And I was told that there were times when staff members or national committee members would take their patch and sew it to a plaid neckerchief, again, as recognition worn during that conference. I don't really have any proof of that, just sort of hearsay, but I do know that that one came from a national committeeman. But in that same light, here's a round from Tuckahoe, Lodge 386 in Pennsylvania, again, sewn to a plaid neckerchief. And my suspicion is that that was done for a conference of some kind, probably for a delegation. Cherokee 50, this is one of the more difficult neckerchiefs from my area in Alabama here. This neckerchief was made, again, I think by someone's mom, and there were like 12 of them, I think, and they were made in 52 for a area conference, and then not continued until later when the lodge would make them for their membership. But these were only given to those who attended the area conference, and I suspect that would have been the case for others the same. This is a piece from Chehaw, Council of Immokalee 353, which is Albany, Georgia. Again, you see this odd shape commonly, early odd shape, from early to mid 50s there, but you don't see it on this neckerchief, right? So I suspect that this neckerchief was something that a bunch of folks got together and made, and probably made them for, again, a delegation to some area meet. But I picked examples like this just to kind of give you a feel for where we were and where we're heading, with Order of the Arrow Neckerchiefs. Here's a few other examples. This felt, I guess it's felt, considered to be felt, from Lodge 251 in Pennsylvania is a difficult felt to find, but you see them, right? How many of them do you see on neckerchiefs? Very few. Originally I thought, well, this was just something that somebody sewed on, but on the back side you've got the number 9 written on it. So some of these were made or put on for some specific reason, and they were numbered, so they must have had some kind of significance there. And so you don't see this on the neckerchief hardly at all. I don't know of another example, but I'm sure there are out there. But I suspect it was done probably for a contingent. These two I got from Lodge 11, and I put these two in here because, first of all, I don't know where this one's from. This one that's chain stitched Order of the Arrow with an arrow across it. I think it's a beautiful old neckerchief. I just don't know where it's from. It just happened to come with this Lodge neckerchief, which, again, this odd shaped patch is a common patch. Sewn to neckerchief, maybe not quite so common. And then below it, there's this blue felt bar. So anyone who knows a little more about, Susquehannock would probably know why that is. And if you do, please tell me, because I don't. And if you recognize this neckerchief, let me know. I've got it in with my Lodge 11 neckerchiefs at this point, but I don't know if that's true or not. I've talked a little bit about contingent neckerchiefs and how contingents and things would sort of make small run pieces, perhaps with their current emblem on them, to use to wear it at certain conferences. That's sort of then morphed into more of lodges creating emblems specific for neckerchiefs on their patches to their general membership. That started in the late 50s, early 60s, and I had to start with Blue Heron because during that time, this was one of the most desired pieces to get. They were colorful. They were restricted. And as a matter of fact, most of these were restricted to their lodge membership. And they have several different runs of these. I just picked a couple. This one, I think, is their 25th anniversary. One just happens to be on a blue cloth. So that would have been, I'm thinking, 70, 71. But anyway, this one I think was from late 50s, early 60s. But Blue Heron is worthy of mention, in my opinion, because they were one of the first to do this for their general membership, to restrict it, to wear it to these national functions, and to get a lot of interest going, I think, particularly in the trading circles. So that kind of spawned a lot of other things, which, in my opinion, now became more not just recognition, of the lodge at a function, but more now toward lodge pride. So if this was almost like, if we're going to go, let's go big. Okay, so the 60s were, okay, let's go big. All right, with these neckerchief patches. Now, I threw this one in there because I didn't have a good place to put it, but this is Lodge 90 Canalinho. And really the reason I put this in here was because a lot of the Western lodges, some of the others, but most of them used this red and white pattern for their lodge neckerchief, and then they would put their emblem on it somehow. The Canalinho Lodge 90 was just a black felt arrowhead, and there are multiple versions of this through the 70s, I would say, through the 60s rather, and probably on into the 70s and maybe farther. But I show this really to show that this kind of standard red and white, half red, half white neckerchief seemed to be the standard out in region 12 and some in region 11, and then just sporadically elsewhere. But as I was mentioning, kind of go big or go home kind of thing. Here's where you start getting into really colorful, big, restricted, difficult to find neckerchief patches, which were now made not just for contingencies or for function use, but now for lodge use. The Manu is sort of a felt composite. 133, the Wheezy Halcon, is kind of a famous one up in the Northeast. This is their vigil neckerchief. I'm told it's a restricted neckerchief. And I'm also told that, and I think this is true, that most of these pies are quarter circle embroidered pieces. Because of their size, a loom run of these would have been maybe 50 to 70 or so, maybe as many as 100. So you could make a small number of these and restrict them, and they could be used for several years in your lodge. Here's a few more. I think the farther we got into the 60s, the more colorful, the more wow factor I think you had. I mentioned this one from Griffin, Georgia, which is really eye-catching. I mean, if you think of that on the back of a neckerchief, similar to Itawamba here, which this one was issued in 65, one per life neckerchief. This Lodge 142, beautiful neckerchief patch, common flat but uncommon neckerchief patch, probably restricted like many of them. Similar to when I went through my collection, I just kind of picked random examples, but Lodge 453, you see the flaps, you don't see the pie or the quarter circle neckerchief patch very much. But again, if you're wearing it at a national function, it told the story. I'm from Southern Iowa. Okay. This cuckoo from Virginia, 161, they had several of these, I think started maybe dating back into the mid to late 50s. This example has the vigil triangle embroidered into it, which I suspect that the vigil member who had this one did himself, although if he did a great job at it because it really looks good. These are difficult neckerchiefs to get anyway, and I don't think I've ever seen another one with a vigil triangle embroidered into it. Lodge 73, we all know that's kind of a tough, small lodge from Wisconsin. The flaps are tough enough. The quarter circle neckerchief patch, I think, even tougher. Once again, probably because they were equally restricted as their flaps, and they were items of pride. And I think that's really the watchword through this, is that these things were items of lodge pride, and you didn't wear them all the time. You wore them maybe at special functions of the lodge or at area conferences, maybe to a national conference. But here's a couple more. I mean, Skyuka 270 had a fairly plain flap, Spartanburg, South Carolina, but they had a beautiful neckerchief patch attached to a purple neckerchief. Now, again, this is eye-catching, right? I'm wearing this and I'm going to be seen, right? This one, Rob, help me out. Is this 521?
Yes, PONUS 521.
Okay, all right. And again, I mean, this is red and black instead of red and white, but that's, I think PONUS had their Brotherhood flaps, the visual flaps, I think were black background. But I mean, this doesn't tell you exactly who the lodge was, but it gets your attention, doesn't it? I mean, if you're wearing it, I don't know. You can tell me what dates this was used. I'm guessing probably early 60s, early to mid 60s, but again, not a tough one to find. The flap's not so hard to find. The neckerchief and the neckerchief patch, even from 521, much tougher to find, probably restricted. Going a little farther, Tarhe 292, again, bright orange. You're wearing this at a national OA conference, people are going to see you. They're gonna, this one even more so, because 548's neckerchief patch, I think if you took this corner and wrapped it around your neck, you could probably touch the other side, the front. This is probably the largest one that I know of from Sequoia Council in California. Beautiful piece. Now, 500, same way, Lodge 500, Rome, New York, kind of a blot, flap, but a beautiful neckerchief patch, which I think was also restricted at the time. And I'm leaning toward all these beautiful pies, but a lot of neckerchiefs used silkscreen as well, and did great jobs with their silk screens, and they were restricted as well. My lodge, Pellissippi's first actual lodge neckerchief, was issued in 62, and it was one per life, and it was a silk screen. Tuskegee, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, 261. I put this one in there because, again, this has become about, in my opinion, lodge pride, lodge recognition. So they put the, as if, when you talk about Ohio State, you talk about the Ohio State University, right? So this is the Tuskegee Lodge 261, which I always thought was kind of interesting. And all their embroidered neckerchiefs, almost all of them have that "the" on there, which I think is probably something that was certainly intentional. We talked about all of these neckerchiefs, going through the 60s and even the 50s as being items of recognition, but what developed a little bit more also in the 60s were specific delegation neckerchiefs for national conferences. And here's just a couple of examples. I think the reason I chose these was because Pellissippi, my lodge's first NOAC delegation neckerchief was 53, and of course the next one would have been 65. But you can tell these were done in somebody's basement, right? So, they had 18, 20 delegates, and the guys got together and created a screen and made these neckerchiefs for their delegates. So it wasn't a big deal. They just made enough for everybody to have one so that they could wear them to the NOAC. Well, guess what? 50 plus years later, those suckers are hard to find. And it probably wasn't a big deal at the time. Didn't have this massive lodge executive committee vote for this. It's just that a few guys got together and said, hey, we need a delegation neckerchief to the conference because I saw this on the back of somebody else's neck the last time. And they said, okay, let's do it. So that's what happened with these, and I suspect that happened in a lot of other instances. Now, the lodge from Detroit, 162, Mijisiel Paugan, actually started doing this with patches in the 50s. I chose this one because, again, you find the patches off of the neckerchief cloth commonly. You don't really see them on the cloth as much. And I suspect since this was 65 and the 50th anniversary year, that they decided to put them on a gold or yellow colored neckerchief. Going back to my comments about these guys just kind of got together and put together these neckerchiefs, okay, without a big LEC vote and all that kind of stuff. Here's a few other examples that I don't really know. Well, a couple of them I know, a couple of them I don't. But This one in the center is actually a Pellissippi Lodge neckerchief to the 71 National OA Conference. Okay. This is a black neckerchief with a silk screened fox head on it. That's it. There's no wording. This just happens to be my picture from all of the delegates who signed this thing, which was hanging in the, actually was found in the garbage of the basement of the scout office in the 70s. But what I'm bringing up here is that this had no markings on it whatsoever. Didn't say Pellissippi, didn't say anything. So had you not known that that's what that was, you wouldn't know what that is. This is a neckerchief I got from southern Mississippi. Okay, in a grouping from TIOC 404, and I have no idea what that is. But I would say that, you know, somewhere along the way, my gut is that the Order of the Arrow had something to do with this, but I have no idea, right? And I suspect that there are many other neckerchiefs similar to this and similar to this that are out there that we either don't know about or cannot associate with the use. This is kind of an example. I brought this one up in Facebook a week or two ago as I was looking through all my stuff. This is the Green Witch, right? We all know it from Greenwich, Connecticut's council, and Lodge 427 up there. That's their totem, the Green Witch. The council also uses this, but I got this from a grouping from that area, which also had some other Connecticut and New York neckerchiefs and Order of the Arrow items from the early 60s. But again, no markings, no nothing. So I mean, this is one of those that who knows what this is. That a few guys might have gotten together and say, hey, we need something to wear to the area conference, this weekend. So let's make up a few of these. I'm not saying that this is a 427 item. I'm just saying that it probably fits many of the items that are out there that we unfortunately cannot catalog because we just don't know. So when you get into the 60s and beyond, now you start realizing that okay, we got these are for recognition. So let's broaden that recognition. Let's do other things other than just lodge recognition. So now you got chapter neckerchiefs, and chapter neckerchiefs in some lodges date way back, right? I just chose this one because I thought it was kind of a cool example of a lodge which was not known for neckerchiefs. Here's another one, Lodge 31, which is kind of a controversial neckerchief. But I've chose it because number one, it's rare, but number two, it says dancer on it. All right. So there was a large shift during this time of lodges who would recognize their dance teams with neckerchiefs and other memorabilia, and neckerchiefs were common because they were kind of this thing that a lot of people looked at. Here's one from one of the chapters of Owassipee. This just happens to have Mateu 62. So this was a neckerchief that the chapter probably made and gave to the guy who served as Mateu that year. All right. But again, it's a piece for recognition in a chapter setting. All right. So more chapter things. This is the Guam, probably post Achin 565. Probably the first chapter neckerchief from out that way. And again, in the vein of Indian dancer neckerchiefs or dance team neckerchiefs, Soakagagwa Lodge in Bloomington was a common place because we landed there many times for national conferences. There was an Indian dance team. You can tell that almost the same totem, everything about it there in that area, which they call themselves the Titi-Pacom Indian dancers. Now, there's no recognition that that's the lodge dance team, but I'd feel safe in saying that the members of that dance team were probably members of the Order of the Arrow. So now you get past the 70s, 60s, 70s, and now we're starting to get into neckerchiefs that are just for about anything, not necessarily for wear now, but more of a resurgence of recognition pieces. Here's from Lodge 102 out in California. It's now common to see Elangomat items. Now, not many Elangomat neckerchiefs, but so this was one I thought I would throw out there. Here's one from Lodge 97. I think this is Lincoln, Nebraska. Here's the neckerchief given to the 91 Lodge Chief. Okay. Probably not too many of those out there. Probably not one that anybody would want to collect on their list. Here's a Lodge 429 who made Chapter Service Corps neckerchiefs for their camporees. All right. Now they managed to put Lodge 429 on it, thanks, so that I actually know where these are from. But I've got a series of these of Chapter Service Corps neckerchiefs from there for multiple camporees during that time, and I suspect these were mid to late 80s, because I think that one's 87. Larry, right in your own state there, John. Here's Lodge 188, Kannapolis chapter. Now, that's got to be one of the less appealing looking neckerchiefs I've ever seen. But again, it fits the idea that, hey, let's get together and come up with something, because we've got to go to a certain something, right? So I suspect there was a small number of these made, and I don't even know when, probably 70s, early 80s. I threw this one in because most of us are familiar with the National Conference flap, but I've never seen one actually attached to a neckerchief, and it looked like it was purposely attached to a neckerchief with I think what looks like a lobster on it. So this was probably done for, I'm guessing 83, maybe 86 NOAC. You guys probably could clarify that, those of you who live it up that way. But I thought it was an odd little thing, because this was looked to be purposeful, to be worn at the conference. Boy, if that wasn't quick enough and superficial enough, let me know. But I'm going to stop there, all right? Because as I mentioned earlier, there's just so much to cover here. But I think the take home is that starting in the 30s or maybe 40s, we started seeing these in the Order of the Arrow setting, and as most things, when you saw them at national events, you saw them on the backs of or around the necks of guys, and you thought, wow, we need to do this. So you go back and you do yours, and then a little bit more, and then, hey, let's do one better than theirs, and hey, let's come up with one even better. And they all tended to be restricted. So they became the piece of the lodge history that a lot of us had to go back and say, hey, we got to get these to be a complete collector of our lodge. So Tico, you said you've got that same neckerchief, but yours has no number but a name in it.
Right, exact same blue neckerchief with red bias with the felt sewn on it, but no number.
How about that? The guy I got that from claimed that was a charter member neckerchief. I just, I'm just saying that's what he told me. I don't know any better.
There it is, but the name is Tom Lefinaswell or something, and maybe he was a charter member. That might be a name we could look up.
It'd be interesting to find out. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the charter member possibility. It's a tough felt. That's all I know.
Yeah, you just, even tougher to find on the neckerchief, in my opinion.